Have you ever been in a situation where it felt like everybody around you was judging you? Not a very pleasant feeling, is it? Feels very uncomfortable. Even if you cannot think of anything that you've done wrong, even if you think you've been doing the best you could with everything, it's just a really uncomfortable feeling. You feel like you always have to be careful. Feel like you always have to kind of look over your shoulder, see if anybody's watching you. Sometimes you get to the point where you're just about afraid to do anything or afraid to say anything because it feels like the people around you are just always waiting and watching, even hoping for the chance to catch you doing something wrong and nail you for it. And so as we talk about what we can give up for Lent, today we're going to talk about giving up judgment. We're going to talk about replacing it with kindness and with love. Now, I want to make clear that in saying that we're giving up judgment, I'm not saying that there are no standards of right and wrong, because I think the Bible makes clear that there are. That Jesus said, "Do not judge, or you too will be judged." But that statement is just one verse of a larger speech that Jesus made, what we now call the Sermon on the Mount. And in that sermon, Jesus tackles all kinds of subjects. Jesus talks about anger and forgiveness. Jesus talks about adultery and lust. He talks about divorce. He talks about revenge, the need to love even our enemies. He talks about humility. He talks about prayer. He talks about greed. And in all of those things, Jesus clearly states, this is what is right and this is what is wrong. Those standards clearly exist, and Jesus is not at all afraid to say so. But in all of those things, Jesus' point is the same. Jesus says, this is how you should live your life. Jesus says, if we are going to call ourselves his followers, if we're going to say we're followers of Jesus, then this is what we should do. This is how we should live. That's why Jesus says, do not judge or you too will be judged. And it's also why he follows it up with, for in the same way you judge others, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. It's also why he then goes on to talk about how we cannot try to remove a speck of sawdust from our own eye, or from someone else's eye, when we have a plank in our own eye. Jesus is not saying that standards of right and wrong don't exist. He clearly says that they do. What he's telling us is to take those standards of right and wrong, of good and evil, and apply them to ourselves. Apply them to our own lives. Not take them and apply them to somebody else's life. Not judge how well somebody else is living up to those standards. Because that's for God to decide. That's not for us to decide. What you and I are supposed to do is focus on living up to those standards ourselves, regardless of what anybody else might do, regardless of what society as a whole might think. Those are standards for each one of us to live up to. And when you think about it, you can kind of see why Jesus would have said it this way, because the bottom line is, the only person whom I have the power to change is me. I cannot change anybody else, and that's true of all of us. The only person we have the power to change is us, ourselves. Now, if somebody else wants to change, we might be able to help them, we might be able to encourage them or support them or give them some advice or something. But we cannot change anybody who does not want to change. The only person we can ever change is ourselves. And as we've talked about before, even changing ourselves can be pretty hard. And so when we think about that, when we think about how hard it is for us to change ourselves, it's pretty obvious that changing somebody else is going to be a pretty impossible task. So our primary focus needs to be on our own behavior. Am I living up to Jesus' standards? Am I living a life that shows I am a follower of Jesus Christ? Am I living humbly, forgiving others, loving my enemies, doing all those other things that Jesus told us all to do? Those are the things that you and I need to focus on, how well we're doing on these things, not judging somebody else. But at the same time, none of us lives in isolation in our lives. We deal with other people all the time in life. Jesus said not to judge others, but if we don't judge people, then what should we do when we have these other people in our lives? Well, the answer is pretty obvious, I suppose. Treat them with kindness. Treat them with understanding. Treat them with caring. Treat them with love. But that's kind of a very pat, nice answer. But having said that, what does it really look like in real life? What does it mean to say that we're not going to judge people, that we're going to treat them with kindness and understanding and love? I mean, it sounds real good. Sounds good in theory. How does it actually play out in our relationships with real people? I think it kind of comes down to the last sentence in our reading for today, what we now commonly call the golden rule. Jesus said, "In everything, do to others what you would have them do to you." Because remember, we talked about how unpleasant it is to feel like we're in a situation where other people are judging us. If it's unpleasant for us when someone's judging us, it must be unpleasant for other people when we're judging them as well. So if we don't want other people to judge us, we'd better not be judging somebody else. But still, that really kind of raises a question, I think. Because then what do we do if we see somebody headed down a wrong road? Especially if it's someone we care about. What do we do when we see them making what are obviously bad decisions, doing things that the Bible clearly says are wrong? What do we do about it? Because we're told not to judge them. But what does that mean? Does it mean we need to approve of what they're doing? Does it mean we should not have any opinion at all about the matter? Does it mean if we do have an opinion, we should keep it to ourselves? What is it that we're supposed to do? How is it we're supposed to react to that? And I think it's a tough question, really. Because we're saying we're going to replace judgment with kindness and with love, but what is the kind thing to do in that situation? What is the loving thing to do in that situation? How would you want someone to treat you if they saw you headed down a wrong road? One possibility is to do nothing. That would be an easy way to handle it. Just ignore the situation, let the person go ahead, do whatever they're doing. Say, well, it's their life, they can live it their way. That'd be one option. Another option would be to start talking about what a terrible person somebody is for doing what they're doing. Be another easy way to handle it. But I don't think either of those easy alternatives would be a particularly kind or a particularly loving thing to do. I don't know that there is an easy way to handle this. But here's what I will tell you. I can look back on my life, and maybe some of you can do this too, I don't know. But I can look back on my life and I can think of times when someone loved me enough to come up to me and tell me that what I was doing was not right, that the way I was doing things was not acceptable, and that I needed to change. Now that was not an easy thing for either one of us. It was not an easy thing for them to come to me and say that, and it was not an easy thing for me to hear it. I did not like it at all when that happened. But after I calmed down and thought about it a while, I realized they had a point. I could see that what they were saying was right. That I did need to make some changes. And as I look back on it, I'm very grateful to them for loving me enough to tell me that. To not let me just continue on the way I was. What I experienced in those situations was not judgment, it was love. It was love that cared enough about me to let me know that I needed to get some things straightened out, that I needed to stop wandering away and get back on track. Doing that is a hard thing. Like I said, it was not easy for either of us when that happened. But love is not always easy. Sometimes love requires us to do hard things, to do things we'd rather not do, to take risks we'd rather not take. But if what we feel truly is love, we'll still do it. We'll do those things we'd rather not do. We'll take those chances we'd rather not take. And the hard thing is, but the necessary thing is, to find a way to do it that shows that it's being done, not from an attitude of judgment, but from an attitude of love and of kindness. And there's one other thing about that, which is that another part of that love and kindness is not abandoning people if they choose not to change. Because again, no one can be changed against their will. It's their choice. If someone chooses not to change, we need to know that let them know that we still love them anyway. Not that we necessarily approve of what they're doing, but that we still love them. We'll still be there for them when they need somebody. And that's not easy either. But it's how we would want somebody to treat us, I think. In those situations where someone loved me enough to tell me that I needed to change. If I'd chosen not to change, I hope that they would have still cared about me. And at some point, if things came crashing down and I had to admit that yes, they were right, I would hope that they'd still have been there for me. Not in a way that says, I told you so. Not in a way that says what an idiot I was for not listening to them. But in a way that just says, I'm there for you. To let me know that I was not alone. That they would do whatever they could to help me pick up the pieces. These are hard things to do. But they are loving things to do. And they are kind things to do. Giving up judgment and loving people is not always easy, because love itself is not always easy. But you know, it is pretty rewarding. Because if, as we say, God is love, then loving people is probably about the most godlike thing that we'll ever do. So, let's focus on giving up judgment and treating people with kindness and with love. Not just for Lent, but for all of our lives. Amen.